Okay, this is lecture 1 for Western Civilization 1. In this lecture, the central question is, what is Western civilization? In this lecture, we're going to discuss the origins of Western civilization, what sets Western civilization apart from other civilizations, what are the problems in the scholarship of Western civilization, and what ideas define Western civilization, and then I'll have some final points about the study of Western civilization. Now, first, origins. Where did this idea of Western civilization come from? Well, let's first start with the Latin root civilis, which means citizen. It's related to the word for city, civitas. Civilizations grew out of cities, or at least that has been the traditional association, is that a civilization includes cities. Oftentimes people today refer to cities or population centers in general as civilization. So this goes to the next part of the origins. Well, what exactly is a city? What things are needed for a city? How do cities function well? Well, first off, they have food supplies and occupations that support food supply. They have irrigation systems. They have systems of water conveyance, drainage systems, aqueducts. They'll have systems of transportation. Some civilizations, large civilizations, even have roads connecting cities to other cities. For instance, ancient Persia had the Persian Royal Road, where a lot of their communication and trade occurred. Cities will have some form of record keeping. They'll have a system of writing for that record keeping, and the record keeping will be done at a governmental level, at a bureaucratic level, at a religious level. And again, that system of writing will be utilized for lawmaking. Hammurabi's Code being one of the earliest known law systems and the earliest written law code, at least in Western civilization. We also have other things, religion, philosophy. Those things become rooted in early civilizations. Now again, this idea that a civilization includes cities is a concept that is sometimes debated. World historians will oftentimes argue that there have been advanced peoples who don't necessarily have cities that define them. And we can even point to various groups throughout history that have not really been known for their cities, but have had a civilization of sorts, among those being the Mongols, the Vikings, and then the various other nomadic peoples from Central Asia. This goes to the next point, definition. What sets Western civilization apart from other civilizations? The term doesn't refer to any geographical region, but the development of a common set of ideas and historical experiences of various peoples, starting in the Near East and then moving into North Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Now, traditionally, and by traditionally I mean going back to the first courses that were offered in Western civilization at Columbia University in the early 20th century, Western civilization has traced the development of Western civilization starting with the earliest foundational origins with Egyptian and Mesopotamian cultures, and then really rooting the study of Western civilization in the study of the ancient Greeks, specifically classical Greece, and then moving on to the Romans, and then from the Romans tracing kind of a linear path from the Greeks to the Romans to the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, all the way up till today. Again, Western civilization is a very traditional course of study. It, again, has its roots in the 20th century. It started out academically and then moved into an actual course, started out as something that was actively researched and then turned into standard required coursework at most colleges or universities in the United States and in Europe. Now, there are a number of problems. What is problematic about the study of Western civilization? Well, not all groups would have thought of themselves as sharing in a common civilization as others. For example, the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians, they would have never thought of themselves as common cultures. They would have seen themselves as completely different, as adversaries at various points in history. And even today, it's hard for people to really recognize these people, or even the Greeks and the Romans for that matter. It's difficult for many people in the modern West to identify culturally with people that were polytheistic. It's just something that a lot of people have a hard time kind of really seeing anything in common with. So these polytheistic theocratic peoples of the ancient Near East, many people today have a hard time seeing the connection there. But again, the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians do, many of the things that their civilizations do create a foundation on which Western civilization is founded on. Now, world historians would argue that the patterns of development of Western civilization, while filled with differences, are not out of concert with the development of other major centers of cultural development in the world. In fact, a number of civilizations are flourishing at the same time. For instance, between 3500 and 1000 BCE, another term you'll sometimes see is BC. Just for clarification on this, BCE stands for before Common Era or before Christian Era. The traditional term is BC or before Christ. In any case, the numbering is the same. So from 3500 to 1000 BCE, you had civilizations in Mesopotamia, the Nile River Valley, and the Indus-Ganges river regions that were flourishing at the same time. And not long after, from 2100 to 1000 BCE, Yellow River civilization and the beginnings of Greek civilization. And you had other civilizations also springing up. So there are a number of civilizations that are operating at the same time, developing many of the same things, and in fact, in some cases, even trading with one another. We know, for instance, the Mesopotamians did have trade with the Indus River civilization, and in fact, even there are some arguments that they had even had some contact with Chinese traders. And so world historians would argue that many of the patterns of development that occur in Western civilization are occurring in other civilizations. But again, this is a difference. It's not necessarily making one superior or inferior. It's just a difference in scholarship. Western civilization takes more of a localized view of one part of the world. World history kind of takes more of a wide view. So now, what is important is not the short-term or immediate changes that happen. It's most important to understand the development of Western ideas and seeing the long-range patterns over time. That's really what the study of Western civilization is about. Again, it's a smaller version of what you might get in a world history course, but definitely more detailed and more oriented towards Western thinking. Oftentimes, the individual and events and ideas are emphasized, which brings up the next point. Ideas. What ideas set Western civilization apart from other civilizations? Not all scholars agree on what these ideas are. A lot of argument goes into this. And these ideas can include the growth of liberal democracy, relatively modern concept with its roots going back to ancient Greece, specifically Athenian Greece. The idea of the nation state. Some historians even argue that the idea of the nation state has its roots with Judaism and the idea of the Hebrews and the Promised Land, and the fact that you have a kingdom of Israel and people kind of uniting under that banner. So that idea of kind of an early idea of nationalism is rooted in Western civilization. But the idea of the nation state being something that is particularly something that comes out of Western civilization. The concepts are a concept of individualism, ethical monotheism. Again, ethical monotheism having some roots in, again, Christianity and Judaism, and to a certain extent even Islam. There's also ideas like Marxism, which we won't get into in this course, nationalism, which we really won't get into this course, capitalism. Some of the early forms of capitalism really start emerging during the Renaissance, but we can even go back further to the Middle Ages and even ancient times for that. And militarism. Some of that, the roots of militarism in Western civilization, go back to the Viking invasions and the fact that oftentimes European kingdoms or European villages or just European territories in general, European people had to be constantly on guard and ready to defend themselves. While the initial civilizations that you'll read and study about don't necessarily reflect these ideas, the developments that they make help set the stage for the development of these ideas. So, in other words, ideas like Marxism, nationalism, capitalism, those ideas, and even individualism, those ideas, while we oftentimes might think of those as modern ideas, the roots of those ideas go back to many of the groups we'll read and study about in this course. So, finally, some last points. What might we want to keep in mind while reading and studying Western civilization? It's really important to remember that the study of Western civilization is neither superior nor inferior to the study of world history as a whole. It's just different. And that Western civilization is neither superior nor inferior to other civilizations. Again, it's just different. It provides a context for the society in which we live. We have a society that's been influenced by Western ideas, by Western developments. And since Western ideas, Western events influenced where we are today, it'll be important to kind of read and study about that, to know the origins of that. So that concludes this lecture, and if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the open forum, which you'll find in the General Files page, General Files folder of the class website. in the assignments section for the course website. And that's all.